Welcome. My name is Kevin Barrett. I am with Success Minded Leader and True North Professional Development here in Seattle. As always, we have Mary Hambleton from Soul Canyon Training and Development in Medford, Oregon. We partner on these. We're on our 6th year, I think it is, of these monthly lunch and learns, and so we share a lot of information, some really great stuff along the way. And we do record these so that we can put them out on our YouTube channels as well, so you can catch any ones that we might have had in the past. Mary, anything else to say before we get started?
Apologize for the snafu a little bit. We started a new year, so we started a new Zoom link, and we will continue with that. If you ever don't get invited, this will be the link for 2026, so you might want to save it. And I'm super excited about what 2026 is going to bring. Year of the horse, fire horse.
Yes, fire horse, not just horse, fire horse. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share, and we may have a few folks still joining us, but I think, by the way, Mary will take care of that, letting folks in. And if you have questions along the way, Mary is going to be monitoring chat as well. So we will, if you have any questions, any comments that you want to make along the way, we welcome those. So feel free to use the chat to send those messages across, and Mary will monitor it and will let me know if there's any questions or any comments to share here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And thank you, Mary, for the welcome. And what today we're going to be talking about is the hidden cost of bad leadership. And so along the way today, I'm gonna really pare this down a bit. This is a massive, massive topic. Could go on for hours and hours on this topic. However, I'm gonna try to just share with you kind of the essentials. What are the most important things that you need to know about the hidden costs of leadership? All right. So a couple of things. Along the way here. My name is Kevin Barrett. As I said, I'm a certified leadership development coach here in Seattle, and I help executives and business owners build high trust teams, retain talent, and drive measurable growth. I also work with individual coaching clients who want to be better leaders. You'll hear a little bit about our Success Minded Leader programs. They are leadership development programs along the way, and certainly you can feel free to check out our website. Today, we are going to talk about leadership, not as a theory, but we're going to talk about behaviors. And so, most importantly, why leadership development often fails, what it actually costs organizations, and what works instead. What are some things that you can do in your organization to make things a little bit better? The research that I will share with you is around what bad leadership is and how to determine the cost, is based on a white paper that I recently authored. Towards the end of this lunch and learn, I will share with you how to get that white paper. The white paper is called exactly the same thing, The Hidden Cost of Bad Leadership. There's a lot of great information in it and a way for you to be able to calculate for your own organization what those costs might be. All right. And I'll go through a little bit of that as we get there. So I'd like to just start kind of and ground ourselves in your experience. So in the chat, if you could just answer this question: why does leadership feel harder today than it did even a few years ago? I'd love to see what folks think. And Mary, maybe you can share some of the answers there as we go through. Anybody have any thoughts on why does leadership feel harder today than it did even a few years ago?
I see people busily typing,
Okay.
but I know for me, all the regulations that are now affecting our ability to manage the way or lead the way we used to can sometimes feel stifling.
Yeah. So you're talking about rules and regulations from managing people, but also payroll and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, all the rules. We're starting to get the results in. Amy says, I feel like COVID changed how many people show up in terms of emotional
Regulation, yeah.
regulation. Yeah. Yvonne said some get promoted based on politics, not experience, merit, therefore lack leadership experience. And
Yeah.
Stephanie said political tensions are super high. Everyone is anxious in ways they've never been before. Technology changes all the time, and it's hard to find solid ground beneath our feet. I'm sure she's meant feet, not feet.
Yeah, those are terrific answers, and I think that is those sum up a lot of what is going on here. But I'll share with you a few other little things. So let's talk a little bit about what's actually driving this. All right, so why does leadership feel harder than it should? Well, leadership today feels harder than it did even 5 or 10 years ago. Expectations are higher, margins are tighter, people are more vocal about what they need from leaders. And this is true whether you're leading an organization in a corporation, a nonprofit, a small business, a civic organization, or even in the faith community. So there's increased pressure, there's competing priorities, there's burnout, and there's disengagement, and there's a lot of rapid change, right? I know Mary can relate to this. Years ago, we would say on our leadership development classes in front of people, you got to get used to rapid change. Well, guess what? It's probably 100 times faster than it was when Mary and I were back in the old days teaching leadership development classes. So, um,
In old days, just like 5, 10 years ago.
yeah, exactly right. All right, so those are some things for us to kind of think about here in terms of this. There's also a leadership gap that is happening here. So what we know about leadership is that leadership does not equal position, right? I am a firm believer that anybody can lead in an organization. However, I think Yvonne mentioned it here. Most leaders are not promoted. They're promoted for results, not leadership, or it could be political as well, right? And so the best accountant gets promoted to the accounting manager, the best salesperson gets promoted to the sales manager, but those skill sets are very, very different, right? The skill set to be a great salesperson versus the skill set to be a great sales manager, right? And so most leaders really aren't necessarily bad leaders, they're just undeveloped leaders or underdeveloped leaders. So training often comes too late, if at all, right? Sometimes we see organizations that are not even training people, right? It's put them in the role of being a leader of a group and then good luck, you know? And I have seen this. I know Mary has seen this as well with our coaching clients, that sometimes we see somebody who was promoted, right? They were great at what they did. They get promoted into being the manager, and then they fail as a manager. And then what does the organization do? They put them on a performance improvement plan, and sometimes they push them out of the organization, right? So you had this great employee that was doing great things, but you put them in a position that has a completely different skill set, they fail, and then you drive them out of the organization. Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But it happens every day. All right. So we have this leadership gap that's going on, right? And let's talk a little bit about how the researchers define bad leadership. So in the white paper, I share data from many different researchers, but there's really four key points that stuck out in this on how bad leadership is defined. So leadership that erodes trust and engagement rather than builds it, right? And so there's lots of ways that that happens, but if they're eroding that leader or that trust and engagement, that can be a huge problem. Supervisors who are abusive, inconsistent, self-focused, or absent. Managers who fail to communicate, coach, or recognize performance. This is a big one that I spend a lot of time on because folks just don't necessarily get it. They don't get how to communicate. They don't get how to coach. They don't get how to recognize performance. And then leaders who create stress, confusion, or psychological insecurity in their teams, right? So lots going on here. And I'm curious if any of you have experienced this with leaders in your organizations. Maybe you work alongside them. Maybe you were that leader at one point and you've gotten better. I certainly have, I know I have experienced that in organizations that I have worked in as well. And so more of a rhetorical question than anything, but do you recognize these kinds of people, right? All right. So here's some other things. This is really what underdeveloped leadership looks like in real life. So we may see like reactive communication, avoided conversations, inconsistent accountability, and we might see decision fatigue, right? And so I want to acknowledge that even the best leaders have these traits show up from time to time. What is important is to recognize these behaviors and then take action to do something about them. If these behaviors continue over and over and over again, that's not a good sign, and it's not going to be a good sign for the organization. All right. So one of the most important points from the white paper is this, that bad leaders don't just frustrate people, they quietly drain organizations. So it's important to note that when I say drain organizations, that means both leaders and employees, right? A couple of years ago, I did one of our lunch and learns and had done some additional research on coming out of the pandemic, how tough that was for managers. And particularly, it's tough in organizations where they're thinning out the manager ranks, right? It's very, very difficult, and that can really be a drain on those leaders, and it absolutely goes to the employees as well, right? So what can we look for, right? What are some of the symptoms? So across industries, research shows that poor leadership behaviors cost organizations hundreds of billions of dollars each year. And that's before we even really talk about culture in an organization. So this applies whether you're leading a corporation, a nonprofit, a church, a civic organization. We tend to see these symptoms come up. We see a drain in productivity. We see morale become eroded. We see increased turnover. And then it impacts the health and well-being of employees. And then guess what? It's a vicious cycle, right? That cycle continues. And what that begins to have happen is that you find that hiring becomes much more complicated. I worked for an organization in which the financial division of the organization had a lot of this stuff going on and a lot of people left and they had a lot of positions to fill. They hired a recruiter and the recruiter came back and said, it's almost impossible for us to find anybody because as big as the Seattle area is, guess what? It's a small town and people know, they've heard, they know what it would be like to come and work for you, and they don't want to come and work for you, right? The reputation is there. So this just really complicates things and adds things and makes it very, very difficult to kind of turn the tide, right? So it takes some really dedicated leadership at the top of that type of an organization to start to change things. All right. So let's take a look at what strong leadership looks like. So, strong leadership creates clarity, safety, ownership, and continuous growth. These are all the foundations of high engagement. So, when there's consistency and clarity from leaders, that is a big, big plus for people, right? When there's psychological safety and trust, so that people feel like they can say what they want to say, they can ask questions, they can challenge things without fear of doing that, right? Ownership and accountability at all levels of the organization, right? That tends to create people who want to take responsibility. And then ongoing feedback and development, really important one, right? So having growth conversations, those growth conversations that are consistent, constructive, and focused on improvement, not blame, right? So here's a pro tip. If you're wondering or thinking that your organization it has strong leadership, don't trust your own thought. Really ask your employees. It's important in all organizations that you really talk to the employees and see, do these traits exist? And in the areas where they don't exist, what's the action plan? How do we create an action plan to be able to address those issues? Now, I'm going to give you some practical things here in a little bit that you can do to get closer to this as well. But let's talk a little bit about the cost of bad leadership. So when researchers talk about bad leadership, they are not talking about villains. They're describing leaders who are inconsistent, absent, overly controlling, or unclear, often unintentionally. So, in other words, leadership that lacks awareness, structure, and support. So let's look at just a fraction of some of the financial impacts. I'm going to share two things from the white paper with you. One is research across industries shows that poor leadership behaviors cost organizations hundreds of billions of dollars each year, 125 to 190 billion dollars per year in healthcare costs alone in the United States. That is huge, right? And so it's people getting sick, having to take time off, right? Because they're sick, because they're stressed. All right. At the company level, even a single ineffective leader can cost up to $125,000 annually in lost revenue and in productivity, right? So there there's really important reasons here for organizations to look at it. And these numbers are pretty staggering, but they're also conservative. And this is just a sample of two of the things that I share about the costs, right? So the thing about this is that most organizations don't track this, right? When you look at the financials of an organization, this stuff is kind of hidden between the lines. And so it's really behooves organizations to take a closer look at this, see how engaged their employees are, and see what they can do to try to reduce some of these costs. The thing is that although they don't track these things explicitly, it's felt every single day, right? People, the employees can feel this stuff going on. All right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the ripple effect of bad leadership. All right. So bad leadership shows up really rarely shows up all at once, right? It shows up in small behaviors, missed deadlines, people checking out, increased errors, and that all creates this ripple effect. All right. So we start to see toxic or inconsistent leadership that leads to higher turnover and replacement costs, right? So very often it costs you 1.5 to 2 times an annual salary to replace that great person that just left your organization or that you just let go because you promoted them into management and they don't have that skill set, right? Increased sick days, stress claims, burnout, all of that stuff happens, right? And it comes at a cost. Lost innovation and collaboration as trust erodes. And I've seen this in organization after organization that when this bad leadership happens, people start to pull back on the ideas sharing the ideas that they might have wanted to share, right? Particularly in those environments where they don't feel safe to say something, right? And then finally, customers feel that disengagement. And usually they feel it right from the top, right? The top of the organization, they can feel that there is this disengagement. And what are they going to do as customers? They're going to disengage and take their dollars elsewhere. All right. So another statistic that I uncovered here, $23.8 billion per year in lost productivity here in the United States, right? And so the more that we can get people engaged as employees, the more we can make sure that we recover some of that money there. All right. And really key to this is that once the trust erodes, recovery becomes more difficult, right? And so we have to really rebuild that trust. All right. So you may be wondering, what is the cost to my organization? So I'll share with you at the end here, I'll share with you the hidden cost of bad leadership, the white paper, and you'll be able to download that. And then there is a calculation in there, so you'll be able to figure that out for your own organization. And I'll kind of walk you through some of the components of that. So before we get into talking a little bit about what can be done about all of this, I want to pause and see if there's any questions, any comments, anything that anybody wants to share. So I'll just leave it open here for a minute or so and just see, does anybody have anything that they'd like to share or questions that they might have? All right, so
I've got a
uh,
chat from Dawn that said several times I've had experiences where employees leave people standing in line when they go on break. Hmm.
Yeah, that really gets into the whole culture thing, right? What's the culture of the organization in terms of customer service? And if you haven't built that culture, that can be a huge, huge problem.
As
And
we
then
always
we had the
say,
one before that, Andrea said, leaders are being asked to deliver results while absorbing constant uncertainty, emotional labor, public scrutiny, and rapid change. Absolutely, right? This is one of the reasons for my career. My calling in life, in particular, are mid-level managers because I think the job is so difficult. There's pressure from above, there's pressure from your employees, there's pressure from customers, and it's very unique compared to maybe some of the other groups that you might see in an organization. And then when we work with organizations that have really thinned out that mid layer, right? And so it just makes it even worse. And that's not to mention the fact that coming out of the pandemic, right, we now have these teams where part of the team might work from home, part of the team works in the office, and that's harder to manage for people, right? Much more difficult. All right.
it is. It's
Great, great.
it's very, very challenging when you can see it from a distance. And we see it, in coaching, is that the middle management is really feeling squished. And oftentimes they will choose just to leave because they can't
Yep.
take the pressure anymore. And then everything collapses. So
Yeah, exactly right. And then we see the cycle go again because then I'm going to take that best accountant and make them the accountant manager, right? And they don't have the skill set to do that. So, uh, with that, let's move into talking a little bit about what we can do about it, right? So, what to do about it, um, the hidden cost of bad leadership. So, this is going to be this next slide here is not meant to be trite, but building a strong culture is really important, strong leadership culture. So if you really want to reduce some of these big costs to your organization, you have to build a strong leadership culture. It's easy to say, but hard to do. So I'm going to break this into kind of two categories of some things to think about here, and then we'll get more specific about leaders and what we need to do with leaders. So first thing is make leadership development a shared practice. And by that I mean shared participation. Leaders at all levels participate, and in fact, top down is the best. I have very often over my career been brought in, uh, let's say a sales VP that says, I want you to fix all these people that report to me, right? And they're oftentimes not excited to hear me say, well, we really need to start at your level. And even better, if we could start above you, that would be great. So, why is that? That's the next bullets that are there. Leadership development provides a shared language around leadership and behavior. There's shared expectations then that can be shared across teams and functions. And then there's shared standards for decisions and for communication, right? So there's fewer leadership gaps, reduces the mixed messages and unintended leadership gaps. My interest in this grew in one organization that I was in where the CEO came to HR. In fact, I was hired because of what the CEO wanted to do, which was to build this strong leadership culture in the organization, right? And wanted it to start at the top and actually build some leadership principles that he wanted the organization to follow. And then we built a whole program off of that. So really important to have kind of a shared practice around that. That takes a lot of work. And I know some of the folks that are here from my side of things are in HR, and they know that's a tough thing, right? It's not an easy thing to get the organization to go in that direction, but that's really the best. All right. But that does not mean that it can't start in small ways, right? So uh, change can start small and still matter. So a few leaders can start meaningful change. So even if it's one or two or three leaders that you focus on, pick kind of some of the key folks that you want to focus on, right? And then that can really, the impact of that and through those teams can really be felt quickly in the organization because the leadership behaviors start to shift. And then a single team can really build momentum around things, right? And really start to get some things done. What we also see is that early adopters influence broad adoption of it, right? So people begin to wonder what's going on with Sarah's team, right? What is happening over there? There's must be some good things that are happening, right? And so change certainly can start small, right? And then make an impact on the organization. I also talk to leaders all the time about reminding them that they're the conversion layer. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes there are things that are coming from above, right, that come into your team that can very negatively impact your team. But you, as a leader, are the conversion layer. You can either buy into that and add on to that negativity, or you can take it and try to work with it and still try to build trust and engagement within your own team, right? All right. So let's talk about it now from the standpoint of individual leaders and what we can do about it. And I'm going to break this apart by two things, two views of this. One is practical leadership development. So, what can happen in your organization now without having to do kind of a professional leadership development? And then we'll talk about professional leadership development and the impacts of that. All right. So, practical leadership development. We're going to talk about five different things. Leadership mindsets. We're going to talk about self-reflection. We're going to talk about practice, emotional intelligence, and then coaching skills. All right. So let's talk about the first one there, leadership mindsets. So skills tell leaders what to do, but mindsets shape how and when they do it. So under pressure, a mindset, not training, can drive daily decisions, communication, interactions, behaviors, which is why consistent leadership requires intentional mindset development. Our research shows that high performing leaders consistently demonstrate the ability to be able to shift their mindset in any given situation, right? And so being able to kind of pull up your creativity, being able to pull up your risk taking mindset and be able to put that hat on is important, right? And so development of that in an organization on what are the leadership mindsets that we want and what are the leadership mindsets that are going to help move this organization forward. Let's talk a little bit about self-reflection. So, self-reflection is an intentional practice that builds awareness of patterns in our decisions, our behaviors, and our impact. It requires practice time, but it allows leaders to respond more intentionally and strengthens judgment, consistency, and trust. The bottom line here is that the more leaders understand themselves, their choices, their decisions, their biases, the stronger leader they are going to be, right? So if we can build that into our organizations, even better, right? All right. Let's talk a little bit about leadership is learned through practice. So we know that awareness doesn't equal change, right? Just because I'm aware of something doesn't mean that things are going to change. Similarly, insight doesn't mean that my behavior is going to change, right? If I know something's wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to change that behavior. All right. But what we do know is that practice and feedback equals growth. All right. So I want to share just a little bit about Michael Jordan. So, Michael Jordan, arguably the best NBA player ever, strongly believed in practice. And he is quoted as saying this. He says, I practice as if I'm playing the game. So when the moment comes in the game, it's not new to me. When you get to that moment, you don't have to think. Instinctively, things happen, right? And so, what are the opportunities for your leaders in your organization to practice, right? And we have to have patience with that.
Hey,
Go ahead,
Kevin.
Mary. Yeah.
Amy makes a comment. One major challenge for leaders to practice changing mindset is the moment in the moment is the feeling of pressure to do more faster. You need to slow down in order to make sure you're in the appropriate mindset. And that is we find that with the squirrel wheel effect where you go, 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 go. And it's like in hindsight, I would have done this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a great point, Amy, and that is why really that having that strong culture from the top of the organization through makes a big difference because that can be recognized and there can be more time for that. And absolutely true. The faster we go, the harder it is to find the time to do that. And I will say as well that I see it in our programs where people just feel like I'm being forced by this program to slow down, right? And that's tough. And it takes them a few weeks to kind of get leveled out a little bit.
So role playing, Amy recommends role playing and to talk about tough conversations, those hard
Mm,
conversations.
yeah,
So it comes
indeed.
off your tongue.
I will tell you all, I'm not a big fan of role playing, and I'll tell you why. And I think Amy is going to mean the same thing because I know Amy. Um, I do what we call real playing. Let's real play this incident that's going on, this situation that's going on, right? Rather than a role play, which is Mary, you be Meryl Streep and I'll be Robert De Niro, and then we can play this out and pretend. And if you've ever been in a any kind of training and you've done role playing where you're given a role,
Mhm.
inevitably somebody becomes the Meryl Streep or the Robert De Niro, and it goes off the rails, and then it doesn't become as relevant. But if it can
Right.
be a real play, right? If it can be, let's talk about this situation. What would you say? And what happens? Hey, if this goes, south a little bit and that employee says this to you, what would you say? Right. And I know that's the way Amy operates. So I'm sure she's probably talking about the same type of thing. All right. Well, let's talk about self-reflection and practice together, which kind of leads to emotional intelligence, right? So this is a really phenomenal book. There are a number of other books that have come out about building on that kind of idea of emotional intelligence. It's defined basically as the ability or the capacity or skill to perceive, assess, and manage the emotions of oneself, of others, and of groups. Well, Daniel Goleman, who wrote the initial book and did the initial research on this, says the most effective leaders are all alike in one crucial way. They have a high degree of emotional intelligence. They're able to manage their own emotions very well. And they're able, if they're talking to someone else who is being very emotional, they're able to adapt to that very, very well, right? And not shame somebody for feeling that. So that is a really important skill to build within leadership development. All right, from there, the last one here, that is coaching skills. So effective coaching starts with asking before telling, listening to understand, not just respond. It helps others think through challenges, build ownership and accountability, and strengthens capability rather than dependency, right? This is sorely needed in most organizations at all levels, right? There's just not enough coaching skills that are going on. It's more direction. People, I'm telling you what to do, right? All right. So another thing to kind of layer on top of this is organizational patience, right? And so Amy kind of mentioned that. Mary, you mentioned it as well. So I often say this, that growth is not a light switch, right? You can't expect someone to learn the tactics of a new skill and be able to immediately perform that skill effectively. It takes time, right, to do that. And so there has to be organizational patience to allow that to happen. All right. And in this fast-paced world that we've been talking about, that is becoming even more precious to be able to do that, right? All right. So let's look at those five things that we just talked about here. And I have some questions for you to kind of consider if you're trying to do this on your own within your organization. So, when we talk about mindsets, where do leaders learn leadership mindsets, right? Where are they going to learn it? Who in the organization is going to help to define that? Um, who ensures that leaders have the time for self-reflection, right? We've talked about the fact that we need to have time to do it, but who's going to make sure, right? For practice, so how do you practice while leading people, right? Are there projects that we can give people? Are there things that we can do and ask them to do to be able to lead people and get some practice where they're going to also get some feedback on that? All right. For emotional intelligence, so how do leaders build it and who can help to be able to do that, right? Very often, leaders in organizations have been very successful without emotional intelligence, right? They've been the manager that I had for a very, very short time because I left, who was, it's my way or the highway, Kevin. He would literally pound his fist into his hand. It's my way or the highway, right? Well, that didn't work. I left and a whole bunch of my colleagues left as well. And then about 90 days later, he left because the organization asked him to leave, right? So emotional intelligence is really important, but who is going to help to build that within the organization? And then finally, coaching skills. So, how do leaders move from directing people to coaching them, particularly if they have leadership above them who is used to just directing people, right? Who is not coaching them, right? So, these are things that you need to really think about if you're going to kind of build leadership development within your organization, right? If you're going to build those skills that we've listed here. All right. All right. From there, let's talk a little bit about professional leadership development. And by that, I mean bringing someone in to help you to be able to do that, right? So when you're seeking help to develop leaders from the outside, what should you look for? All right. So here's some things that I would suggest. One is a balanced focus on core leadership capabilities, including the ones that are listed there on the screen on the left-hand side, right? So a balanced focus on those. Secondly, here, let's talk about ongoing reinforcement, not one-time training, right? And that is, I think, something that happens in organizations all the time. We put people in 5 days in a classroom, right? Uh, the emails are still coming in for them. The projects are still running, right? They're distracted and they have their phone in front of them during class. They may be taking notes, but they get back to class and then that book gets put right up on the shelf and things go back to the way that they were. And maybe they've picked up a few things, but they didn't really get any practice at it, right? So that ongoing reinforcement is a really, really important thing. Oh, I'm going the wrong way here. All right, feedback and coaching support, right? Very important to have that to uh, improve leadership within your organization fairly rapidly, right? Paced learning that allows for maximum growth, right? So you can't take somebody to the swimming pool and expect them to be in the Olympics the next day, right? It's not going to happen. You need to have paced learning that's going to happen to build those skills and for people to get better. All right. Measurement and clear outcomes. So, what's the measurement of the program? What are the clear outcomes that you want to see at the end of that program? And then finally, I would say a clear deliverable for the leader. So, what do you expect that leader to be able to do at the end of the leadership development, right? How can they contribute to the organization, right? And we have found that involving people in that decision is really the best thing, right? It motivates people because it's something they really, truly want to do. I'm really pleased to say that our organization has all those elements, and I'm very proud of that fact. So if you do want to talk about that, I'm happy to set up some time with you. All right. So we've talked about the ripple effect of bad leadership, the costs of lost productivity, the health costs, the lost revenue, the hiring costs that go in, right? And so some things for you to kind of think about. Organizations can really cut these losses significantly by developing leaders that are grounded in self-reflection, coaching excellence, and disciplined development. Those are the key things, right? All right. So, how do you calculate the cost for your organization? There are four factors that are in here for you to think about: the number of leaders, the size of the team, the degree of disengagement that you have, and then the average compensation of those folks. And I'm not going to take the time right now to go through the calculation. It's in the white paper, but I will tell you this, that we will help you in that white paper to define what category you best fall under. So you can see that we've got it ranked there anywhere from low impact up to very high impact. And there are very specific traits that fall into those so that you can look at your organization and go, okay, that this category fits the best. So when I go to do the calculation, I know which of those percentages to utilize. All right. Really, really great stuff that is in the white paper. All right. All right. So how do you get the white paper? Well, here you go. Here is the link to it, and you can also use that UR uh, code. That code. Yeah, I can't think of what it's called. Um, but you can use that code if you utilize your phone. You can use it right now and be able to get to exactly where that is, or use the URL that's up there at the top, and get that white paper. And then you'll learn a lot more than we talked about today, but you'll also get the opportunity to kind of do that calculation. I think that's a really important thing for organizations to do. All right, I'm going to leave that up there just for another 10 or 15 seconds here. And then I've got a couple of slides to wrap things up, and then I'll turn things over to Mary to talk about next month. All right. So I really, really want to emphasize that leadership development isn't an operational cost, right? I see this in organizations all the time. They want to know what the cost of this is going to be. That's an important thing, right? To get into financials. But what it doesn't show by putting it in your financials, putting it into a budget, what it doesn't show is that it's really an investment. And it's proven to yield measurable ROI by reversing these hidden costs that we've talked about that poor leadership brings, right? So one of my goals is to really teach organizations to stop thinking about it as just an expense. It is an expense, there's no question about it, but it does have an investment part of it, right? That is going to help you recover some of those funds that are lost by poor leadership. All right. So if you want to talk more, here's some information about me. You're more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn if you would like to do that, or send me an email, give me a call. Happy to talk more about what we can do from a leadership development standpoint, or if you just want to get more information, absolutely feel free to do that. All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. And Mary, what's coming up next month?
So you and I hadn't had a chance to talk yet, but I am really close to publishing my new book, Leadership Lessons from the Kitchen with Love. And next month's topic is going to briefly cover all 13 lessons. So
Awesome.
look forward to seeing you all on March 4th for Leadership Lessons from the Kitchen with Love.
All right. And to everybody that joined, thank you very much. And to those on my side that got the wrong link, I really appreciate you finding us. We have recorded this. So once Zoom is done processing all of that, Mary and I will get those loaded up into our YouTube channels. And we'll send a link out to everybody that was registered so you can watch it again, you can share it, and get more out of it, hopefully.
And leave us a Google review for all of
Love
the
that.
great trainings. I think that's a fabulous way to say thank you. So we appreciate
Excellent.
them.
Uh, any final questions that anybody has, any thoughts that they have on what we've talked about?
Thank you, Andrea. She said, great info. Thank you.
Great.
Dawn,
Excellent. Oh, thank you, Don.
thank you.
All right.
All right.
All right, well, I'll hang out for a little bit if anybody has any questions, but otherwise, thank you all for joining us and look for an email from us on the with the link to the video.